Welcome back to the YouTube channel. Today's class will be learning how to make this beautiful stylish yoke dress. Okay, it has this shirt illusion yoke on the upper part, and then the sleeve has this stylish flare and a cuff. It's a very beautiful tutorial and it's very simple to make. If this is something you like to learn, kindly stay tuned till the end of this tutorial. Thank you. Okay, so I have my basic body drafted here already. This is my shoulder. Yeah, I'm using, because it's a shirt, it's like a shirt neckline. I don't want the neckline too wide, so I'm using 2.75 against 3 inches. You can also use 3 inches if you don't mind, and the neck depth for the front is 3 inches. So this is my armhole line, my bust point, my under bust, and my waistline. And then I want to draw my armhole curve. So the first thing I'm going to do, this is a yoke dress. As we have seen, the yoke part is going to be the shirt illusion. So the first thing I'm going to do is to create my neckline. So depending on how deep you want your yoke to be, I don't want it too deep, so I'm just going to be measuring around 6.5 inches. So after measuring 6.5 inches, I'm going to measure 2 inches inwards like this, and then on my armhole area I'm going to measure 4 inches downwards. Okay, so these are measurements that I want to work with. You can work with whatever measurement that you desire. Okay, so after that I'm going to connect all of this. So I'm going to connect it in a way that it's not going to be a sweetheart. You can see me extending it like this, so it's going to be like a U kind of neckline. So I'm joining from my armhole to the 2 inches inwards that I marked, and then from there I'm going to try and blend it in with what I have here. So you can see I'm just trying to smoothly blend everything in. So now that the neckline is sorted out, I'm going to create my bustier dart. So for the dart, I'm going to measure my bust span. That's 8 inches divided by 4. So I'm measuring 4 inches from the center fold here, and I'm going to make that into a straight line. Okay, so I'll mark that on my under bust and my bust point. So now I'm going to take a dart of 1 inch on both sides on my under bust and my waistline, and I'll make that into a straight line as well, after which I'm going to connect to my bust point with my curve. So now I'm going to extend this line to my neckline, to where my neckline stops, so that I can tighten that upper part. So using my curved ruler now, I'm going to connect this together. Okay, on both sides, and then to tighten my upper part, I'm going to measure 1/2 inch on both sides here as well, and then I'm going to, the 1 inch that I'm removing, I'm going to connect it in. Okay, so now I'm going to connect the 1/2 inch back to my bust point like this and like this. Okay, so please use a good curve for this. I'm sorry about the noise, it's kind of noisy here. So okay, so now after connecting it, all of this is going off as my dart, and then I'm going to redraw my armhole line. Remember, we went outwards by 1 inch. Okay, so now I'm reconnecting my armhole as well. So the next thing is for me to mark my circumference measurement. I already have my bust to be 10 inches. That's 40 divided by 4, so I have 10 inches here. I'm going to add my seam allowance to this. On my waistline, my waist is 28 divided by 4 is 7, so I have 3 inches here, and I'm just going to make my 7 inches and then add my seam allowance to that as well. So now I'm going to connect my bust to my waist, and that is all you need to do. So this is going to be my yoke. So because this is a shirt, when you are cutting this on your fabric, on this part I'm going to be adding my placket. So you need to note that I'm going to be adding your placket allowance. So I'm just going to be hiding around 2 to 2.5 inches for placket allowance on my center fold for the front. Okay, so now for the back is simple. I already drafted it out. The next thing I'm just going to do is to create my yoke. So now for the yoke, the same 4 inches that I went down on my armhole, I'm going to mark it at the back armhole as well. So now you can maintain these 4 inches and just make your yoke straight down, but I just want mine to be a little bit stylish, so I'm just going to be connecting that to my chest line so that I can have like a V-shape effect there. So this is going to be the yoke for the back, and there's going to be a zipper running through the back. So I already have my zipper allowance. The next thing is for me to cut this out now, and then we'll go ahead and cut it on our fabric. Okay, so I forgot to mention for my bust that I'm going to go down by 2 inches from the bust point, as you can see. Then I'm going to connect to this point, and this is also going to be out as well. So now I'm going to cut out my pattern. So you can just cut out the first dart so that I can easily close your bust dart, and then you transfer the dart to the waist. Okay, so I'm going to close my dart now, and then I'll hold it down with a tape. So I've cut this out now. This is the center front, the side front, and this is the yoke. So I'll go ahead and cut this on my fabric. I'm going to cut this with Ankara fabric, these two, and then I'm going to be cutting my yoke on my plain fabric. So when I'm cutting it, I'll make sure to leave 2.5 inches allowance for my bottom placket. So that's for the front, and then for the back, I have also cut it out. This is the lower part, and this is the yoke. So I'm going to be cutting this lower part with Ankara, and then the yoke on my main fabric as well. And then I'm going to hold my dart after that, so I'm not slashing it. So if you want to slash your dart into two, what you just need to do is to make sure that your center line, you extend it to where your neckline stops, so that you can separate them and have 2 separate pieces. So I'll go and cut this now and bring it back to show us what we have. So I have cut this on my fabric. This is the back. You can see the back yoke as well, and then I added allowances where necessary. So these are my front pieces, and then for the yoke of the front, you can see that I first measured out my button placket before placing it. So this is going to be for the placket, and this is my lower part. So I added allowances for joining them together as well. So now before I join, I want to quickly cut my sleeve. So I'm using the plain fabric for the sleeve, and I already cut out my basic sleeve. So now if you want yours to be really puffy, you can use the measurement that you used, 10 inches that you used for the upper part as well on the hem of the sleeve. Then you gather it into your cuff. So that way by the time you gather it, it's going to be puffy. But for me, I don't want it too puffy, so my actual round measurement was around 8 inches, around 8.5 inches. So I just added 1 inch extra so that I can just split it, gather it a little bit into my cuff. So my actual sleeve length is 23 inches. I want my cuff to be around 4 inches. So if I deduct 4 inches from 23 inches, I'm going to be left with 19 inches. Okay, I want the cuff to be around 5 inches. Okay, so if I deduct 5 inches from the 23 inches, I'm going to be left with around 18 inches. So I just added extra 2 inches. One is going to be for my seam allowance, and the other one is just going to give the sleeve enough room to rest on the cuff. So this is my actual sleeve. So now for the flare on the sleeve, you're going to determine where you're going to be placing it. So from the head of my sleeve now, I'm going to measure 7 inches for my first flare, and then from the first flare I'm going to measure another 6 inches for the second flare. This is totally up to you and how you want the placement of your flare. So now after taking that measurement, the next thing, I'm trying to make sure that I have it really straight. Okay, so now after taking your measurements, the next thing is for you to make a straight line, okay, on both parts. So here, from here, I'm measuring another 6 inches, and then I'm going to connect that as well. So this is going to be for my first flare, and this is going to be for my second flare. So to measure the radius of your flare, what you need to do is just take the measurement of this straight line. So for this one is 19 inches. So this 19 inches, I'm going to divide it by 6.28 if you are working with a full flare, and if it's a half circle flare, you divide it by 3.14. those are constants. Then for the second flare, you measure the length that you have here as well. I have 16 inches, so what I have here, I'm just going to divide that also by 6.28 or 3.14 if I'm working with a full circle flare or half circle flare. So the length of my flare is going to be around 5 inches each, okay, including allowance, including hemming allowance. By the time I hem it, I'm going to be having about 4 inches. So again, this is totally up to you and what you want. So I'm going to go ahead and cut the flare as well. So I've got to cut my two flares now. This is the first one. So you just need to hem it on the lower part. You can also weave it, and then I'm going to flip it like this on my sleeve. I'll sew it down. Then after sewing it down, I can now flip it over. So that's going to be the first one. And then for the second one as well, I'm going to place it like this, sew, and then I'll also flip it. So I'll have two flares. I'll do the same thing for the other sleeve as well before we now move to our cuff. So now to moving on to the main bodies. For the back, I'm going to take my dart here. Then after taking my dart, I'm going to, if you're going to be adding lining to this, so you cut your lining exactly the same way you have cut your lower body, so that I can use them to conceal this edge neatly. So after taking my dart, I'm going to join the yoke together with the allowance that I left. So for the front, I'm going to join it together on the dart as well. Then after joining it together on the dart, I'm going to create my button placket. So now to create this button placket, I'm going to remove this and then notch that placket area. Okay, so after notching the placket area, I know where my placket is stopped. So now to create my placket, I'm going to fold this in first, and then I'm going to fold it over to meet that notch. Okay, so I have my placket. So you can create your placket internally or externally, because this fabric does not really have a wrong side, so I can get away with it. But if yours have two different sides, you should be mindful of how you fold your placket. So now I'll fold my placket and sew. Then after sewing, I'm going to place them on each other before sewing it to my lower body. So I'll do this one step at a time. I've created my button placket now. So the next thing is to place the two plackets on each other, and then I'm going to hold it with a pin tentatively. Okay, so this is what I have, and I've also gone ahead to sew my lower parts together. So the same way is how you're going to sew your lining. So now I'm going to sew the yoke. Then if you're adding lining to yours, what you just need to do after sewing your yoke is just to place your lining on it, sew it, and then you use it to flip it. So I'm going to sew the yoke together now. And for the back, I have held my dart for the back as well, and then I went ahead to sew my yoke. So you can see the shape that we have for the yoke. So if you don't want it V like this, all you just need to do is to measure your 4 inches and have a straight line. But I think making it V shape like this is really nice, as we have seen. So now after sewing my front yoke together, the next thing I'm going to do now is just to place my front and back against each other, and then I'm going to sew them on the shoulder as well as the side seam. Okay, so I'm sewing this straight because I'm not going to be fixing zipper to mine. And for my sleeve also, I have gone to sew my flare to the sleeve. So this is the first one, this is the second one. When you flip it over, you can see that the rough edges is not going to show. So these are my two flares now. The next thing is to cut out your cuff. So I already have a tutorial on how to cut a cuff and sew on the channel, so you can check that out. I'm going to fix my cuff to mine, and then I will sew it to the bodies already before we move to the collar. Okay, so I have sewn my cuff to the sleeve. I just worked with a regular cuff. You can use a standard shirt cuff as well. And then I fixed my sleeve to my body and I sewed them together. So now to create my collar, I have a detailed tutorial on how to sew a collar on the channel already, but because this is like we're going to be separating it into two pieces, so I'm going to run us through it. So the first thing you need to do is to measure the part. Remember, once you remove your pin now from your placket, you are going to have your pieces separated. So this is going to be one side and this is going to be the other side. So what you need to do is to measure where you're going to be placing your collar, and for me I have it as 9 inches. Okay, so that's from the center back to the center front of one side. So to create that collar, you need that 9 inches measurement. So what I'm going to do is just to take my tape rule now and then measure 9 inches. Okay, so I like to cut my collar and my collar stand together. So I'm measuring the 9 inches and this is what I have. So for my collar stand I work with 1.25. so I'm going to be measuring the 1.25 from the starting point, which is here. So once you get that, I'm going to rule it to make a straight line. Okay, so now that we have this is going to be my collar stand. So for the collar, depending on how high you want it, so I'm going to be working with just 2.5 inches from my collar stand, and then I'm going to rule that as well. So now where this collar stops, where the collar stand stops, I'm going to come inwards by 1.25. okay, and I'm going to make this a straight line just so that I can know where this stops. Okay, so you come inwards by 1.25 here, and then from there I'm going to curve it like this to my collar stand. So this is going to be my front. Remember I said ideally if you are going to be cutting your collar, this is how you create your collar. Then here you can just come in by 0.25 and then I'm going to connect it, and this is going to be my collar stand. But usually I just connect it to that starting point directly like that. So cutting this out now, you are going to have this, and when you are cutting it, you cut it on your stay. Okay, so you can watch that video on collar. I'm not going to be going into too much details here. So now cutting this out now, if you are cutting for one single piece, what you just need to do is to make sure you cut this part on fold, and then you have your two sides together. So now because you're going to be having this collar at the back as well, so the shaping that I did here I'm going to do on the back because there's a zipper that is going to run through it. So for the back I'm going to come in by 1.25 as well. I'm not going to shape it the way I shaped for the front. I'm just going to leave it like that, and then I'm going to connect this to my collar diagonally. So now once I connect it, I'm going to cut this off. Okay, so like I said, I'm not shaping it, I'm just going to leave it straight. So this is going to be for my back. Okay, so now the next thing is to go and cut this on your spade and then you fix it. So if you don't know how to sew a collar, go and check that video, it is detailed. So now you have it together. Once you finish and then you iron it, this is what it's going to look like. So once you fix this now, this is going to be fixed to the front and this is going to be fixed to the back, and then you have two of these, one for each side. So I've gone ahead to do this for my main bodies, and this is my collar. Okay, so this is the collar and this is the collar stand. So I've already sewn it to it, and this is what I have. So now the next thing is for you to just fix a button here, or you just sew it completely closed and then you fix a button. So you can actually fix a button and a buttonhole so that you can open it up, and if you don't want to open it up, you can just close it up and then just put your button so that you can just have a button illusion there. And this is what we have on the back. You can see that for the back I just left it straight because remember we have a zipper allowance there. My zipper is just going to run through all of them like this. So the next thing is just to fix the zipper now, and then we'll take this to the mannequin so that we can see what it looks like. Okay, so this is what our outfit looks like. You can see our collar here. I fixed 2 buttons on this, so I decided not to close my button up, so I just made a button hole so that I can open it or close if I want. And you can see the neckline that we created for our yoke. So this is the sleeve with the double flare and the cuff, and this is what the full view of the outfit looks like. You can see how beautiful it is to make this and how simple it looks. I hope you enjoyed making this beautiful tutorial with me. If you enjoyed it, let us know in the comment section. Like, comment and subscribe to our channel, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.